The world is complicated for girls. It's a difficult place for them to develop a strong sense of confidence. Confidence in their bodies, their abilities, their opinions, their opportunities. And ultimately, confidence in themselves. But what if there was an in-depth, evidence-based solution to help girls develop the skills needed to navigate these challenges? To help them learn how to stand up for themselves, handle pressure and conflict, and learn the power of no. Stop. I can. I will. This is the power of ROCKS, a different kind of organization with only one mission: to equip girls with the skills to live strong, independent, safe, and courageous lives. ROCKS isn't just a curriculum, it's a movement. ROCKS is empowering thousands of girls and is training parents and educators with programs in schools and communities across the country. Join the movement to help every girl say,
I am a ROCKS girl, and I'm ruling my own experiences
from this generation forward. Go to rulingourexperiences.org to learn more.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Ruling Our Experiences team, we are grateful to have you join us for today's webinar from the ROCKS Institute for Research and Training. Our mission at ROCKS is to create generations of confident girls who are in control of their own relationships, experiences, decisions, and futures. My name is Marty Ridley. I'm the development coordinator at ROCKS and mom to a 12-year-old ROCKS girl. At ROCKS, we understand that the world was challenging for girls before this global pandemic. And now we know that girls continue to need skills and support more than they ever have before. I'm honored to have you join me in learning from the latest ROCKS research on how we can best support the girls that we care about as they continue to navigate a world that is impacted by COVID-19. Before I introduce you to today's presenter, I wanted to take a moment to bring some awareness to the work that we're doing at ROCKS to continue supporting girls through this time. Over the last 10 years, ROCKS has quickly grown to become the national nonprofit leader in programming, research, and education, all focused on girls. We've become a leader in this space because we've really laser-focused our expertise in 3 areas. That first area is programming for girls. So we train and license school counselors and educators to deliver our evidence program through their school sites. Last school year, we were able to have over 5,000 girls participate in ROCKS at schools all across the nation. To make sure that girls still have access to ROCKS programming and resources, we're working right now very diligently to translate our in-person program to a virtual learning platform in time for the start of the next academic year. The second area of expertise is research for everyone. We conduct and disseminate large-scale research regularly. In 2017, we completed the nation's largest study of its kind on girls, where we surveyed nearly 11,000 adolescent girls to hear directly from them about the issues they're facing and how adults like us can better support them. Today, you'll get to hear data and insights from our latest ROCKS survey, where we focused on girls and their experiences with COVID. Our third area of expertise is education for adults. So similar to this workshop today, ROCKS delivers professional development workshops and trainings focused on creating stronger girls, safer schools, and successful students. I am now pleased to introduce you to ROCKS founder and executive director, a nationally recognized researcher, speaker, author, and expert in girls empowerment programming. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Lisa Hinkleman to start today's webinar.
I am so excited to have a little time with you today to share a bit about the latest work that we're doing here at ROCKS and to help you think about the upcoming school year, the girls in your life, and how we can successfully figure out how to navigate this together. What we've realized since we even started this research was that the world is changing so rapidly, and even the data that we collected just several weeks ago might now even look different because the the pandemic shifts, the way that the world is responding to it shifts, the way that schools are trying to be responsive and figure out what back to education is going to look like in the fall is shifting day by day. And so we recognize that we're in a very challenging moment, but one that we want to ensure that we're trying to stay ahead of, because one of the things that we know is that this is impacting girls profoundly. It's impacting all of us profoundly, but we know that girls are particularly vulnerable due to the isolation and due to the disconnect from their friend network. And so as we begin to understand on a deeper level what their experiences are, we want to quickly be sharing this information with you, the people that most love and care about girls. And so our time together today is going to kind of focus on an education frame and also a parent frame. We have a chat that is moderated, and my colleague Dorothy will be taking any questions that you have, and we'll do an open Q&A at the end. And so she'll give me some of the questions that you might have to pose at the end of our time together. And then we also, for many of you who registered, you put some questions that you had in advance. And so I'm gonna try to address some of those as well throughout our time together today. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen to walk you through some of the data in a bit of a more formal way. And then we'll save the last 15 minutes or so for the Q&A. So as Marty indicated, like, the world wasn't easy for girls before. And I think what we found was that they were dealing with all kinds of challenges, from relationships to confidence to time spent on social media. And I think that our attention was so laser focused on girls' experiences living in this moment right now and how we could help insulate them in some ways from the challenges, but also develop the skills that they need to navigate the complex challenges. And now with this overlay of this global pandemic, it's sort of like, how do we prioritize now what girls need the most? And that was a bit of the impetus for us to kind of dive in and understand what we could learn from them through this COVID study, because we had a really good understanding of the landscape of girls prior to this. And so I just want to spend 2 minutes. You may have seen this video already, but if you haven't, it's a good opportunity for us to center in the research of what we already know about girls, and then I'll dive into the COVID specific findings that we've had. So here goes.
At ROCS, we wanted to gain a deeper understanding of the challenges girls face every day, not just in one region, one community, or one type of school, but everywhere. That's why we developed the Girls Index, the first ever largest of its kind national survey designed to provide new insights into the complex world of today's girls. We surveyed over 10,000 girls from across the country and asked them about the issues impacting their lives. Here's what we learned. Confidence declines sharply from 5th to 9th grade and doesn't return to pre-middle school levels. By the time girls get to high school, 46% don't believe they're smart enough for their dream career. 1 in 3 stay away from leadership positions because they don't want to appear bossy. And 1 in 2 don't speak their mind or disagree with others because they want to be liked. Even among the highest achieving girls, confidence is an issue. 30% with a 4.0 grade point average don't think they're smart enough for their dream job. The Girls Index showed us that we are not dealing with a lack of confidence, rather a crisis of confidence. This research has also helped us understand the role of technology and social media in girls' relationships, aspirations, and well-being. We learned that most high school girls spend 6 hours each day using social media, and those who spend the most time online are 5 times more likely to say they are sad or depressed nearly every day. Girls who spend the most time engaged with technology and social media are less likely to have supportive friendships, participate in extracurricular activities, trust other girls, and enjoy coming to school. But by building confident girls who have effective friendships, we can combat many of these challenges. Over and over, as we asked girls what they needed to be successful, their number one response was confidence. Because confident girls are more likely to share their opinions. Confident girls put trust in themselves and each other. Confident girls grow up to be the brave leaders of tomorrow. Together, we can turn this crisis of confidence into the opportunity of a generation. To learn more about the groundbreaking research in the Girls Index and about ROCKS, go to www.rulingourexperiences.org.
So, as you can see, there's so many stats that can jump out to you that are distressing, that kind of in some ways can take your breath away of like, how is this the reality of what girls are going through right now? So I want us to recognize that those challenges still exist. And now there's an overlay of this large global crisis that doesn't make the other issues impacting girls any less significant. And now we're all forced to be adjusting to these very rapid life challenges. And this doesn't just apply to girls, this applies to all of us. And if you're like me, when this thing first started, we were kind of like, okay, we're doing these stay-at-home orders, we're schooling from home, we're gonna kind of shift the way that we're thinking about our programming for these next couple weeks or months, and then it's gonna get back to normal. And so there was this like this sense of like all of this disruption, but in the back of my mind, it was sort of like this, it was time limited. There was an end in sight. And of course, by fall, we're gonna, kind of be back to normal. And what we're realizing is that's not going to be the case, is that there's this uncertain and it's ever-changing environment. And so even when we begin to get a sense that maybe there's some stability or normalcy, things change again. And with that element persisting to be part of what we're all dealing with, it's very hard to plan, it's very hard to forecast, and it's very hard to provide a sense of stability or security for any of us. And so that has to be part of the lens and the view that we're thinking about when we're approaching our interactions with girls, is that we don't have the ability or the wherewithal to say like, everything's going to be fine and here's the end in sight. So we have to recognize that these changes are happening rapidly. And what we're all experiencing is much less opportunity for connection, much less opportunity for connection in the ways that we're used to. And if you're like me, I'm a super extrovert. I enjoy being around people. They give me energy. This is really hard. And figuring out like how to get your social and your personal kinds of needs met through technology doesn't quite replicate real life connection with people if that is what you enjoy and what you're used to and what gives you life. We also know that girls, and many of us, are missing out on important milestones, from weddings getting postponed and baby showers being canceled and graduations not happening or becoming virtual. These elements of our life that have become important hallmark milestones are now shifting in major ways. And for girls, some of those milestones are really important. Like that 8th grade spring dance may have been really important for her, or the senior who is getting ready to graduate or graduating and going on to college. Those milestones are often looked forward to for so many years. The other life challenges that we see are the decreased interactions with peers, but also increased family time. And for some, that is enjoyable, but not for all. And so our circumstances, and I think that it's important that we're all viewing our circumstances as unique. We can't universally apply like, oh, I totally like this stay-at-home thing because I'm getting to have dinner with my family every night and I really, really enjoy that. because that might not be the case for the girls that you work with or the girls who are in your classroom, because being home with her family might be a space that she feels very stressed out because she lives in a chaotic home environment, or she is experiencing maltreatment or abuse in some way. And so the idea of being home is not as this glamorous, joyous opportunity to reconnect with the people that she loves most in the world. So I want to talk a bit about our research and why we did what we did. So for us, our programming across the country in the spring just halted when schools went to stay at home. And we had to figure out, like, how can we support girls in this moment, and what do they need from us right now? And so we didn't want to assume that we knew that. We didn't want to assume like, okay, well, obviously they're feeling this way, or obviously they're thinking this way, so this is what we need to do. And like we do at ROCS, we use data to make our decisions about our programming, about what we do next, and where we focus our energy and efforts. And so we deployed a survey in May, and we had nearly 1,300 girls participate who represented over 80 schools throughout the United States. And so you could see the breakdown: about 30% elementary, 44% were middle school, and 27% were high school respondents. One of the things that jumped out to us the most was the very high levels of isolation and loneliness that girls reported. Nearly 80% of girls talked about feeling more lonely or isolated since COVID-19 started, and a third reported feeling much more isolated and lonely. For girls, loneliness and isolation is, we have to think about it a bit differently than we do with boys in many cases, because girls so often define themselves based on their relationships with others. And girls have much more interdependence in their growing up years than independence, meaning that who they are in relation to their peer group and friend group is part of how they construct their identity. And so the removal of girls from that social environment can have a differential impact on them. And so when we see these very high rates of isolation and loneliness, it becomes a bit of a red flag for us to pay attention to, because it's not just that they're sad or that they're bored. It's also a risk factor for increased levels of sadness, depression, and anxiety that we need to pay attention to. And so when we're thinking about how to manage isolation and loneliness in girls, we really have to make a focus on showing that we care and that we're worried about girls if we start to see or notice this. And the reality is that we have to empathize with what they're going through right now and not diminish their emotions as some like childhood thing, right? Like, oh, you'll be fine. Like, my situation is so much harder. If you got laid off from your job, then I could see you complaining, but you don't really have anything to worry about. You have a house, you have food, you're good. Sometimes when we think about like we're all dealing with this situation simultaneously, we often think of like our own adult problems as the more important ones. That we have to pay the mortgage, and we have to keep the health insurance, and we have to figure out how to get food on the table. And all our girl has to do is just be along for the ride. But for her, she's missing out on all kinds of things that are in her experience equal in difficulty to the stuff that we're dealing with. So showing empathy in these times instead of demeaning or diminishing her experiences are really important. And so acknowledging that it's frustrating and that the situation is hard, and then figuring out the spaces and places that we might want to connect her with support services. And so reaching out to the school network, the school counselors, the school social workers, and community counselors. We know that right now there's a lot of telehealth that is happening. And from that situation, it's where they can connect virtually via Zoom or another kind of web interactive program. They can use the phone. It's opportunities to ensure that there's still access to support services in ways despite the fact that we can't necessarily gather in person. What we also saw in this research is that 58% of girls said that they are uncertain or scared about their future. And this jumped out to me as really concerning, because it wasn't unique to just girls that were in high school or starting their senior year or getting ready to graduate. We saw this trend throughout the grades, 5th through 12. And so they recognize that this is a scary moment, but they also are recognizing, like, we don't necessarily know what the future is going to hold and what that means for the dreams and ideas that they had for themselves. When we looked at some of the open-ended responses around this, we heard girls write about their future plans or the careers that they wanted to have, and uncertainty of whether or not those would even be options. So some of the quotes that we heard is, when am I going to have my life back to normal, or is this the new normal? And I wonder if I will ever be able to walk into a school building ever again. A 6th grade girl said, I think about if we're even going to make it out of this situation. So for us, those statements felt so significant because they were so real. We saw in this report that a little over half of girls said that the experience has made them think differently about their future. And for more than half, this uncertainty or being scared was the predominant theme. When we looked at what's happening for girls in school and in their education and academic aspects, we wanted to understand how their executive functioning was being impacted, which is their ability to focus and concentrate and organize. These are areas that educators really focus on because it demonstrates their ability to engage with particular content, to organize it and see it through to the end. And so much of the stay-at-home orders and the learn from home happened so rapidly that it didn't give academic institutions sufficient time to be able to really prepare or plan or build an infrastructure that was most efficacious for this type of learning. And so what we saw is that right off the bat, girls were reporting higher levels of stress than before, reporting that their schoolwork was much harder than before, but also that they were struggling with keeping up with their schoolwork and that they were able to be organized and they could concentrate well. So when you look at these last two columns, this is a percent, the green bar and the gray bar, that's the percentage of girls who say, my schoolwork is organized and I can concentrate. So nearly 60% of girls are having trouble in that area. And the same with the percent who say that they're keeping up with their schoolwork. Less than half are keeping up. And so we recognize that these are areas that we need to attend to when we're thinking about a return to education coming up here in just a few weeks' time. We ask girls what they want from their teachers and administrators and counselors. Like, what do you need from the educators in your life? And I wanted to pull some of their actual words because I think they speak in ways that sometimes numbers can't or don't. And so we saw this theme of positivity, hope, and support that girls wanted. Some of the quotes that jumped out to me were, be there for me. I need to know that you're available. Give us hope that it will get better. I just need them to talk to me and check up on me. I'm really not sure. I just have no motivation whatsoever. I don't want to do anything anymore. I miss having interactions. I've always been a shy person, but just having people around was comforting and a good environment. I really miss it. I miss my teachers, my friends, and everyone else. They also are looking for clear direction from educators. We heard things like, I wish more of my teachers would talk and interact with us. Many are sending work expecting us to learn on our own without any guidance or teaching. Stay positive and give us very clear directions. They're also looking for patience and understanding. Understand that our lives are hard. I just got kicked out of my house last night, so nothing is going right. I'm having a lot of trouble concentrating when I'm at home. I don't think they really understand how different it is. Honestly, to listen and understand where we're coming from. I feel like no teachers or anyone ever listens and tries to help. Now, I didn't change if the girls put emphasis in their statements. I left them exactly as they were. We also saw this stat that around 40% of girls say that their relationships are harder than they were before. And I would imagine that most of us as adults would say that too, is that somehow like a Zoom happy hour doesn't replace a real life one, or sending a hug emoji doesn't feel quite as adequate as a real hug from somebody. Relationships for girls are challenging in general. And right now, they're much harder than they were before. And so for us, we have to think about how we're encouraging connections between and among girls that are virtual and dynamic, with friends and other support people, not just texting back and forth. When I think about making dynamic connections, it's in real time. It's where I'm seeing your face and what it's doing. It's where the body language that you are giving off is something that I can receive and understand. Are you interested? Are you leaning forward? Are you happy to see me? That feels qualitatively different than words on a screen. We also want to help girls find new ways to experience connection during this time. And while we're seeing that some have been able to connect with their peers, perhaps through playing sports or through attending birthday parties or through other things, we know that there's some who haven't been able to engage with their peers in that way. And so helping girls not feel left out, because some of them are watching their friends be able to do things with one another and kind of be living life a bit more normally, and they're disconnected from that and feeling pretty frustrated. And so helping them figure out the ways that they can experience connection, whether it's outdoors and it's a shared picnic, or whether they're going on a bike ride together, ways that connections can happen that are both safe and respectful. We wanted to know what girls wanted from parents as well. One of the themes was patience around schoolwork. Here's some of the quotes that really jumped out to me. My parents could help me by helping with my homework, understanding me, staying active with me, and not to talk all the time about stress. They can help me with my schoolwork when I'm struggling. My mom's angry at me for having my schoolwork behind, so she took my phone, and that's my only outlet. I like to talk to my friends about my problems, but the only adult I have right now is my dad. Be understanding that online school can be very difficult and stressful. Let me concentrate and let me do what I'm doing instead of interrupting me. The other theme that we heard from girls was give me some space. Literally, the one girl said, how can parents help you? She said, by giving me some space. By being easier on us and understanding that we're very stressed out as well and having a tough time with this. Be understanding that just because we're at home doesn't mean you can give us a bunch of chores and things to do around the house, because we still have school and homework, but we're trying our best to balance school time and family time. My parents could support me by giving me space when I need it, whether or not I specifically ask for it. I often tend to err on the side of not voicing my needs until it's too late. This is a hard balance, right? Because we don't want to hover and helicopter our girls, but at the same time, we don't want to give them so much space where they don't feel supported. Oftentimes the girls, there's an age difference between girls who are looking for more space and less space. And as girls approach the middle school years and early high school years, that tends to be times where they're pulling back a bit, where they want to be left alone a little more, where they're trying to figure things out and they just find their parents exasperate them. And so it's figuring out a balance between support and giving her the chance to develop some independence. And sometimes that's harder on parents than it is on girls themselves. And so we have to think about how we give them opportunities to be in control. And that can include how they're spending their time when they're at home, and that it's okay if you spend this much time at home or in your room or doing your own thing, but there is an expectation that you join the family for these kinds of activities. Because let's face it, we all need time to be alone. Even the most extroverted amongst us need time to be by ourselves, to re-energize, to not feel like we have to entertain or know everything that's going on. And so make sure that you're having time to be alone too, and that even though we're all kind of in these houses sometimes together, we still need to find opportunities to create some space and distance, whether it's going for a walk or putting on some headphones, and feeling an opportunity to calm and disconnect so that we can be more attentive and engaged and happy when we do reconnect. We also want to help give girls opportunities to feel like they have some say and input in what's happening. Because let's face it, we're all feeling pretty out of control right now because so many things are being put upon us. For most of us, the agency that we typically have in our lives has been taken away in a lot of areas, from where we can travel, whose house we can go to, which family members we can visit, whether we can be at our place of employment, whether our child can be at daycare. All of these elements have been taken as someone else's choice, and we're constantly trying to adapt to it. And girls are feeling that pressure as well. And so think about opportunities to give them spaces where they can have a say, where their decision or their input matters. And I think that sometimes that's hard for us to think about because we're making safety decisions, we're making family decisions, and get with the program, kid, you're along for the ride. But that contributes to a sense of feeling anxious and out of control. So look for the small ways that she can contribute her opinion and voice and ideas to the ways that the family might be able to navigate the circumstances that they're facing in safe and respectful ways. The reality here is girls aren't necessarily looking for us to fix this. They just want us to listen and to understand. And I think that when we find ourselves in these circumstances that are seemingly out of our control, our first responsibility is to understand what the impact is on the people that we care about most, and not just assume that we know what that is. And so for us, we will continue to keep the pulse on what this experience is looking like for girls and continue to provide updated data and research, because things are going to look different here in just a few weeks' time when the back to formal learning begins, whatever that looks like. And we know that there are learnings and findings for educators as well as parents that are constantly changing. And what that means is that it doesn't negate the data that was previously collected. It means that the new circumstances and situation of the world requires us to reassess and reevaluate on an ongoing basis so that we have the opportunity to be the most responsive to the girls in this particular moment. So I know on our website, and you'll get a follow-up email about this too, you can download the report. It's just a 5-page research brief that is a high-level overview of the data and also includes some recommendations for educators about thinking about their return to school and what we have ascertained are things that they need to consider as they think about the social and emotional supports for their students, as well as the vulnerabilities that are increased based on this current dynamic. And then there's recommendations for parents to think about how they are paying attention to what's happening to their individual girl or girls from a social, emotional, psychological, and interpersonal standpoint of what are the areas at which you should start to get concerned, and what are the things that we need to make sure that we're doing actively with her in this moment, so that we're best positioned for the best possible outcomes as we move through these challenges together. So I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to lean on Dorothy to toss me some of the questions that have come up that have been sent to you throughout our time together.
Yeah, so our first question actually comes from a teacher. This teacher says, I'm a teacher who's expected to teach hundreds of students virtually next year. Our district barely has resources and structure to teach the kids their academic subjects. How can we even begin to think about the other kinds of supports that the students say they want from us?
Yeah, okay. So teachers, school counselors, educators, everyone who's working in a school environment, we are feeling you right now, and know that it's like a really scary time for students, but it's a scary time for you too. As we think about like our network of hundreds of ROCS facilitators throughout the country, we are feeling their anxiety about what all this is going to look like. And so when I think about the academic piece and the social and emotional piece that make up student success, right now, it seems to me that we're really focused exclusively on the academic program delivery and figuring out what that should look like. That's what people are most concerned about right now. And that's what we're seeing is, how do we translate math to an online portal? How do we translate core academic subjects to be able to be taught in this virtual environment? I think what we're missing in all of this is how we help support all of the social, emotional, and mental health issues that are bound to come with this transition, and that are bound to surface in ways that are less typical than how we've seen before. And so I think for teachers who are right now just beginning to understand how to deliver some of this content that they're so well versed and competent in teaching in person to an online platform, you're also being asked to think about how you make sure that your students are doing okay. And this is where I'm hopeful that school administrators will make sure that they're turning their eyes to focus a bit on how we're ensuring the social, emotional, and mental health of students. Because we know with this increased isolation, we know with this stay at home, that mental health issues are more likely to bubble up and even increase, and that we might not be able to see them as easily as we can in person, because we can miss a lot of what's happening through technology. And so I think schools might need to consider how they're doing well assessments for their kids on how kids are coping, and checks along the way to see how resilient kids are being, see what support mechanisms that kids need, and to utilize their school counselors, school social workers, and other student support services to figure out what a comprehensive school counseling program looks like in a virtual setting. And these things exist, right? Because we know that we have entire virtual school academies that have robust school counseling programs, but we just have to figure out how that implementation looks virtually, which means that there is going to be some increased responsibility for teachers to be able to pick up on some of the distress that students might be experiencing, and then know the route that they need to take to connect that student with support services. that's one of the areas that we're really paying attention to, and hope to continue to provide some resources, not only to our ROCS facilitators throughout the country, but to the larger population of folks who focus on student support who are working in schools. So that's a long answer to the question, but I think it's a very complex question with a lot of unknowns and areas that we just need to start paying more attention to as we're constructing these back to school plans.
Thank you. Our next question, I get that girls want to be left alone sometimes, but how do I know how much time alone is too much? I don't want her to start isolating herself or get depressed.
For sure. Oh, how much time is too much alone time? I think that's such a good question, because how much time is too much alone time for you? And how much time is too much alone time for any of the other people in your life? I think this has a lot to do with introversion and extroversion, and that people who are introverts need more time alone to re-energize and to recuperate, because being around people exhausts them. And then you've got the extroverts who, like, being alone is exhausting and boring for them, and so being around people is where they get their energy. I think you've got to try to figure this out with your girl, and have the conversation of, like, hey, you've been spending a lot of time by yourself, like, share with me what you're up to, and is it feel good for you, or are you feeling lonely? I think having an open dialogue about the why she wants to be alone, and she might just, like, huff and roll her eyes at you like, ugh, just leave me alone. But it's also being alone can also be a result of feeling suffocated, or like there's a helicopter around her trying to manage all of her life and everything she's doing, and are you okay, and what do you need, and are you happy? And so sometimes, like, the retreat from the incessant engagement and involvement is her way to create some separation. And so I think there's two roles here, like, one for the adult to try to assess what their own behavior is in that scenario, to find out if she's feeling a little overwhelmed or suffocated by the engagement from the adult. And then some open conversation about, like, okay, how much time does she need, and what does she need that to look like? And when she's not by herself, is she engaging with us, with the family, with friends, in healthy and appropriate ways? So if she's completely isolated or spending time alone, and then not engaging in healthy and reciprocal ways with other relationships, that feels to me like a red flag. If she's spending some time alone and then, like, has all these great and strong relationships and just needs that alone time to re-energize, that feels healthier to me. So I think it's assessing the why, and then the what's happening when she's not isolating.
Yeah, so a follow-up to that, how do I know if my daughter is depressed?
Yeah, well, depression can play itself out in lots of different ways, differently between children and adolescents than it does in adults. But some of the, like, key things I pay attention to are changes in behavior, appearance, and performance. And so, for example, if she begins to withdraw and retreat from her relationships, and she's typically an outgoing and fun-loving girl, if we notice changes in her appearance, that she's disheveled, or that she's eating way more or way less than usual, or that she's sleeping way more or way less than usual. We also can see anger and irritability as elements of depression in girls, and even sometimes, like, angry outbursts. So it's not always as clear cut. Like, there's these criteria for diagnosing depression in adults, and they tend to coagulate around the same kinds of concepts. For children and adolescents, it can look very different. The other piece around performance is, was she typically a good student and now we see her grades dropping or her interest in school dropping? Was she typically like super into her sport and now she wants nothing to do with it? I think focusing on not just this, like she's crying, like depression is not always like I'm crying all the time and I can't get myself out of bed, although it can look like that. We can find it play itself out in different ways among children and adolescents. And so really paying attention to the differences, but also knowing that a lot of what I just said is like puberty too. And so sometimes it's hard to differentiate between like, is something going on that's not okay, or is this just puberty? And so keeping that dialogue open and paying attention to what we're noticing, I think are very key areas in this space, and then intervening in appropriate ways when we feel like maybe something is a little off.
I'm gonna try to squeeze in one last question here.
Sure.
How can I be reassuring to my daughter when I struggle to reassure myself?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Because I think that if we're being honest, it's pretty hard to reassure ourselves right now that this is all going to just be great and we're all going to get through this and life is going to go back to normal. So I think that particularly depending on the age of our girl, we have to be honest with her. Like, I don't think it's a good idea to paint these pictures of rainbows and unicorns and that the world is, we're just a few minutes away from everything being back to normal. Because we don't necessarily know that. And I do think that while we want to insulate girls from, the worst things that are out there in the world, we also want to be honest with them about what's happening in the developmentally appropriate ways that we can. And so I don't think it's ever a good idea to tell girls that everything's going to be okay in circumstances or situations where we don't know that that's true. I think we could say things like, man, this is really hard and we don't know what's next, but we're gonna do it together. And it's hard for me to know what to tell you because I'm still trying to make sense of this myself. But as I figure this out, I'll share with you what I'm learning, and together we can make decisions about how we're going to do this. So I think I do think there's often strength in vulnerability, right? Of acknowledging that I don't have all the answers here. And I'm not going to pretend that I do, but I'm not going to do things to just overtly scare you for no reason. And so I think when we acknowledge that not all of this makes sense to us and that the information is constantly changing, but we're going to make the best decisions for our family, and I'm going to make the best decisions for you, and we're going to make these decisions together, helps girls feel that, like, regardless of the things that are out of their control, there are people and there are decisions that are within their control. And that despite how chaotic or tumultuous or scary or uncertain it seems, that she's got this soft place to land of the people who are going to support her, whether that's her family or her teachers or her school environment, that these are the people that care most about her and are going to be with her alongside this journey of figuring out this most uncertain time. Was that our last question?
Yes, it was.
Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and wrap us up. I'm so appreciative of you joining us today and asking some of those actually hard questions. And we will continue to put out the data that we continue to collect and resources and tools that we think are most relevant to the people who work with, parent, and mentor and care about girls. I know that you realize at this point, this is such a passion area for us, and ensuring that we are continually producing content that's helpful and useful for you is exactly what we want to do. So I know that we'll be following up with a quick survey and a link to some additional resources where you can download the report as well as all of our other reports. And we'll be having more webinars, resources, and actually research studies coming out here within the coming months. And we're here to support you in this back to learning environment. And we're really all in this together. So thank you for your commitment to girls, and thank you for being open to learning some new things, and for believing that together we can make this world better for girls. Have a wonderful afternoon.